The Xbox 360 was released at the end of 2005 and impressively managed to beat the PS3 and Wii to the punch by about a year. But a lot of time has passed since then, and we are now seeing the next generation of consoles, which means for the first time, the Xbox 360 won't be considered last gen. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today we're taking a big picture look at one of my favorite consoles of all time, the Xbox 360. How does it hold up 15 years later? The Xbox 360 has always been very special to me personally. Before it, I had a PS2, and then my uncle for the Christmas of 2009 got me and my brother the arcade version of the Xbox 360. The arcade version I have here looks very similar to the original console, except with a white disc tray instead of chrome. Personally, I find this to be a much cleaner look, although unbeknownst to me at the time, and probably my uncle as well, this was kind of the worst model of the 360. This is because it had very little onboard storage. We're talking 256 megabytes, yikes. To its credit, we did have an HDMI port, unlike the original, and it also fared better when it came to red ringing. The first wave of consoles were really the worst with that, although it wasn't uncommon to see it later. Yeah, it's the start of the video, but we may as well get the whole red ringing controversy out of the way. Basically, the old 360s had the tendency to overheat, among many other various issues, and this would result in red rings instead of green rings when you attempted to boot it up, and of course the console wouldn't work. This quickly became infamous, and while the PS3 did face similar issues with the lesser known yellow light of death, it wasn't nearly as widespread, and as a result, finding a 360 from 2005 that still works is a harder task than you might expect, and that was a pretty big problem for Microsoft. Of course, newer iterations of the 360 did improve things significantly, especially when we got past the Xbox 360 Elite and Arcade onto the Xbox 360S, also known as the Slim, which came out around 2010. And then of course there's the 360 no one's ever heard of, the Xbox 360E, which looks more like the Xbox One than anything else and came out in 2013, around the same time as the Xbox One. Of course I don't have this one, but it looks just kind of wrong to me. I much prefer the sleeker design of the Slim, or even the kind of chunky original. Of course, if you think the Xbox 360 is big, just compare it to its older brother, the original Xbox. Yeah, that thing is an absolute unit. The Xbox 360 started off with a bang, partly thanks to its early release, as well as better game library than the struggling PlayStation 3. And it only kept getting better, with the debatable peak being the Halo 3 launch in the September of 2007. Don't forget this was before the age of digital games, meaning the excitement was real, and you had thousands of people lining up to get their hands on it as soon as possible. Things were looking fantastic for Microsoft by the end of 2007. They were completely wrecking Sony in sales, and it didn't seem like they could go anywhere but up. Unfortunately, Microsoft's hubris would kind of be their downfall. Off the back of Halo 3, we saw the Kinect release in 2010. The Xbox Kinect was a massive disappointment. The tech behind it was super cool, but ultimately all it was a cash grab trying to piggyback off the Wii's success. The Wii, by the way, outsold both the 360 and PS3, so just remember that the next time you see people on Twitter fighting over which was the superior system. By the way, what is it with people on Twitter and everywhere really arguing about which console is better? How are console wars still a thing? Who cares? Buy what you like, whether it's a PS5, Xbox Series X, or Sega Dreamcast. I don't care. If you enjoy it, that's all that matters. Also, I won't talk too much today about the Kinect, but it's something I'd like to possibly do a full video on, just because there's so much involved with that thing. So if you guys like to see that, well, hit the like button and we'll see what happens. But yeah, the Kinect had basically nothing but shovelware, and a lot of the E3 demos that happened were staged. The games were mediocre, and even some fun ones I remember like Kinect Adventures just don't hold up anywhere near Wii Sports. But here's the thing, the Kinect sold really well. So well in fact that this started a bit of a mini era in Microsoft where they just stopped caring, at least about the games, and they realized, hey, we can sell anything. This carried over into the Xbox One, as Microsoft attempted to make it more of an entertainment machine than a gaming console. But perhaps I'm getting a bit off track here. Overall, the Xbox 360 was absolutely terrific, and while the PS3 did eventually end up outselling it, it wasn't by much, and the 360 definitely had the much stronger start. There's no doubt that the Xbox 360 provided some of the best years of gaming we've ever seen. And luckily for us, unlike PlayStation owners, we can still relive those years as the majority of big Xbox 360 titles are completely playable on newer Xboxes. I have a ton of respect for the amount of work Microsoft has put into making so many titles backwards compatible. All you have to do is slide in your old 360 disc and the game will download to your system. Not all old games are available, but most games you can name off the top of your head are available, and that's a really nice consumer-friendly decision coming from Xbox, especially considering how poorly the Xbox One started. Microsoft put in a lot of work to make things better around the midpoint / end of the console generation, and backwards compatibility was a big part of that. But one downside of the backwards compatibility is it makes your 360 kind of pointless, besides for nostalgia reasons and for the few games that aren't backwards compatible. Personally, it's been a long time since I've booted up my 360. I suppose another reason you might want to pull out your 360 is to use the old controller. It's considered to be one of the best of all time for good reason. It is. The 360 controller is absolutely fantastic. It looks good, not as sleek as the newer ones, but this is from 2005. It feels good in the hands, and I really enjoy having the joysticks offset. I don't mind my PS4 controller, but I still generally stick with Xbox One controllers when I have the choice. It just feels a bit better in my hands. The Xbox One controller pretty much just took the 360 controller and made it a bit more modern looking, and the Xbox Series X barely changed anything from there. Some might see this as kind of boring, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the 360 set a precedent of a great controller that more or less still remains on newer systems. One nice touch that's missing from the newer controllers is how the Xbox logo lights up depending on what player you are. So one bar for player 1, second spot for player 2, you get the idea. It's a simple touch, but again, it's something I really appreciate. A lot of these controllers haven't aged the best, especially the white ones, but they can be up to 15 years old, so it's tough to expect too much. They still use AA's, which so do the newest Xbox controllers. Some people like that, some people don't, and you can still find rechargeable batteries for them if you look around. Also, this is kind of irrelevant, but I'm pretty convinced that one of my friends stole one of my white controllers back in the day. I have zero evidence of this, but I know I brought it to one of their houses and then it disappeared. So yeah, if you're watching this and you stole my Xbox 360 controller back in the day, it's not too late to do the right thing and return the controller. I won't even call the cops, man, I promise.
Tim plus T.
Let's talk about the actual games, the reason you would buy a 360 back in the day. From the Halo games to the Fable games, there were a great few exclusives to sink your teeth into, not to mention the massive amount of games that came this generation across all consoles. Mass Effect, Fallout 3, and New Vegas, Red Dead Redemption, Skyrim, and Oblivion, classic Call of Duty titles like the Modern Warfare series to Black Ops 1 and 2, Batman Arkham City, GTA 4, many Assassin's Creeds, Borderlands 2, BioShock, Far Cry 3, Skate 3, Dishonored, and so many more. This doesn't even scratch the surface, and again, what's great is the vast majority of big titles are playable on newer Xboxes, whether you have the Xbox One or even the latest Xbox Series X. Are the graphics on these games terrific? Definitely not, although there was a lot of progress from the early titles to what we saw at the end of the generation. The HD quality graphics, often in 720 to even 1080p, also helped the longevity a lot, smart, as it ensured that even now, 360 games don't look too bad on modern TVs. And what's more important than that, the level of gameplay still holds up, at least for the most part. And these games are fun, just plain fun. A lot of these games came out before the days of DLC and microtransactions, and it's hard not to appreciate that. Xbox Live is worth a quick mention because the 360 really started the rush of online gaming, and soon the classic years of playing Call of Duty and getting told your mom wasn't faithful began. It was a paid subscription, much like today, and honestly, it hasn't really changed much over the years, which I think is a testament to how ahead of the game Microsoft was when it came to online play with the 360. All in all, the Xbox 360 was and always has been one of my favorite game consoles of all time. It isn't just the nostalgia factor, it's a fantastic machine. It was for years the console to have, and it deserved that title, with spectacular games and just an overall hugely fun experience. It was behind the PS3 in some aspects, but it was ahead in others, and really regardless of which console you played, I think we can all agree both were great for their own reasons. Although, to be fair, most last generation games are better to be played on the Xbox 360 than the PS3, as the PS3, while technically more powerful, had a very confusing architecture that was difficult to develop for, and so 360 games often have a slight graphical boost and better frames per second. So yeah, keep that in mind if you're torn between the two for some reason 15 years later. And if you do want to buy an Xbox 360, they are laughably cheap. Maybe you missed this console generation the first time around, and if you did, well, good news, you can find these things everywhere for very little money. Now, the originals are always the cheapest, but unless you're going to be playing the heck out of them, I wouldn't worry too much about red ringing issues anymore. And the games are also very cheap. If you look around on eBay and local private sale sites like Craigslist, I'm sure you could find a deal, and might even find a great bundle, as people just want to offload everything for cheap. So buying a 360 all these years later, if you don't have a newer Xbox, it's something you can do, and it won't cost you a lot. I have so many fond memories of 360 games. Halo Reach, Assassin's Creed 2, Skyrim. Oh my gosh, I played so much Skyrim on 360. The load times were ridiculous. Simpler times, and a time I kind of miss. I'm sure a lot of you do too, so let me ask you, what was your favorite game for the Xbox 360? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm about done here. If you found this video interesting or enjoyable, maybe hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content just like this. You can follow me over on Twitter and Instagram at 91_tech if you'd like to for some reason. And we do have a Discord, links in the description. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.